Welcome back to Story in 5 Pages. This is our Angel Encounter series where we encourage anyone to send in stories of angel encounters, miracles, or any other spiritual interactions. Today's story is titled Lunch and Gas on Him. Thinking back on all the events that unfolded in my life, I would say anyone's life can change in the blink of an eye. I'm Rick from Wisconsin. I'd like to share what happened to me. I probably need to go back to my college days because that's when I first got into my line of profession. I was a sophomore in college when a well-known advertising company came around the campus looking for summer interns. At the time, I didn't really know the ins and outs of advertising, but what I did know how to do was captivate an audience to see things from my perspective. I was told that I was a rare talent and that it would take me far in the advertising world, so I ran with it. I studied among the best in the company. I landed giant contracts just as the executives did, mine being free labor, of course. But every summer, I was invited back to intern again. But by the time I graduated from college, the company had already decided to bring me on as an entry level executive. It wasn't my dream job. I don't even think I had one. My superiors told me I was being offered top dollar, considering I was fresh out of college with no other experience than interning with the company every summer. The salary and executive perks would definitely put me in a financial position to which I had previously been accustomed, and the idea alone was growing on me by the second. I accepted the position. At the time, I was the youngest executive in the firm. My nickname around the office became Young X, and it stuck. I don't have the slightest idea if people being hired after me even knew my real name. At any rate, how the contracts came rolling in. My bosses put a lot of pressure on me to deliver to clients with the hardest sales. I have to admit, I did not disappoint. With each new client came big cash bonuses for me, a new office with a wonderful view, and my very own designated parking space, just 2 skips and a hop away from the door I had to enter to get to my office. Yes, this was the life. Suddenly, a year passed by, and I only realized it because I had just celebrated my birthday the day after signing on with the company, and then I heard buzzing about another surprise birthday party for me. I immediately took an inventory of my life. I was sitting pretty financially. I lived in a 1-room apartment where I just basically slept because my work kept me in the office at all hours, and I usually ordered takeout while at work. I didn't have time to make friends with anyone, much less meet any ladies. Suddenly, out of the blue, it happened. I was sitting in my office looking out the window, and I saw the most beautiful creature sitting at a park bench reading a book. I was in awe. I pretended to be checking my pocket watch. I'd take it out of my pocket, open the watch, and close it without even looking at the time. I thought I saw her steal glances, and I'm not sure, but on one of those glances, I thought she smiled. Finally, she closed her book and asked, "Well, are you going to ask me out or not?" I did, and a year from that date, we became Mr. and Mrs. During this time, the company was steadily growing. I was landing more and more tough contracts and receiving bigger cash bonuses, not to mention increasing salaries along the way. I hosted a lot of dinners, wining and dining potential clients. Well, Eileen did. She handled that department and did a marvelous job.
It's a party, it's a party.
I was flying high from where I sat. There was nothing but clear skies ahead. I continued to bank most of my salary. Face it, I was young, newly married, and living in the 80s. Life was not very expensive then. Well, it didn't have to be. 5 years into our marriage, my wife, Eileen, suggested we start looking for a new home that would be more suitable for rearing a family. That was her way of telling me we were expecting a bundle of joy, which really turned out to be 2 bundles of joy. A set of twin boys, Timothy and Thomas. Just like I didn't have a dream job, I had never even thought of a dream house. I let my wife handle those details. She found a nice, spacious house in the suburbs just outside of the city with lots of outdoor space and a pool. We talked to the realtor and discovered that we actually had 2/3 of the value of the house in our bank account. I opted to put down half with the plan to pay off the rest the following year. It didn't quite work out that way, but I will get to that part later. At this point, it had been 7 years since I started with this advertising company, and I had just celebrated my 29th birthday. The contracts kept coming and the money kept rolling in. We had taken on so many new clients that I was allowed to hire my own staff to handle office work, manage my schedule, and answer my phone calls. Hello, thank you for calling. We were living in Eileen's dream house and loving the family life. Yep, I was flying high and still only blue skies ahead. By the time Timothy and Thomas were 5, Eileen let it slip that we could be expecting another bundle of joy in the next 7 to 8 months, which turned out to be 2 more bundles of joy. This time, a set of twin girls. We were completely prepared. Our children wanted for nothing. That made Eileen happy, which made me happy. Eileen decided to put the boys in private day school. She preferred them to be at home in the comforts of our own home after school, enjoy dinner together as a family in the evening, and sleep in their own beds. Eileen and I had come to an agreement that I would join the family meals when possible, but for the most part, Eileen packed my lunch and dropped dinner off to me before she and the kids ate. But without fail, Sundays belonged to the family. We spent the first part of Sunday at our church, First Presbyterian, followed by brunch at IHOP and an early afternoon park adventure, and finally dinner in the early evening. It wasn't an ideal situation, but it was normal for us, and like it or not, that's what we did. In the midst of earning all this cash, Eileen and I had begun to upgrade. We each got luxury cars, which I opted to lease instead of buy. It was rather expensive, including the insurance, but we were still sitting pretty financially, so it didn't seem like an unnecessary expense. I was 45 years old when the boys got their licenses. They wanted sports cars, to which I agreed. They only had to do well in school and mind authority figures, especially their mother. Again, I opted to lease, not buy. Yes, it was more costly, especially the insurance since they were young male drivers, but if the cars broke down, I just trade them in for new ones and wouldn't end with a junk pile of broken down cars. Also at that time, the girls began attending private day school. Private school for 4 children was definitely costly, but it's what Eileen wanted, and I was determined to give her her heart's desires. We were still sitting strong financially, but it had been some time since we actually saved money. Everything coming in now went to pay the everyday cost of living expenses. Maybe then I should have been thinking more about the future, but as they say, hindsight is 20/20. I failed to think about it, but with each passing year, I was a year older. I saw new young whippersnappers being hired into the company, but I still brought in the most new clients, especially the ones who put up resistance. Then, in a blink of an eye, 7 more years had passed, and I was now 52 years old. It came without warning. The air was kind of somber when I walked into the building. Before I could even make it to my office, one of my superiors slapped me on the shoulder and said, "Young X, there's a meeting with all the upper execs starting in the conference room in 15. I smiled and nodded. I looked around and noticed that people were either avoiding looking at me or looking at me with faces of pity. I shrugged it off. I headed towards my office, but the same superior called my name. "Rick, you don't have time for that." I felt a sudden sense of doom. He hadn't called me by my birth name in 30 years. I went into the conference room and was escorted to a seat around the conference table. A small box in front of me had my name on it. Beside the box was a large manila envelope, also with my name written on it. There were a few other execs spread out in the room, but I was now the oldest exec doing the job that I did. My superior cleared his throat and began speaking. "First, let me tell you, this was no easy decision. I'm finding myself at a lack of comforting words, so I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off. As you know, the company is all about the bottom line. Our mantra is that our bottom line increased by at least 20% more than the year before. We have managed to do this for the most part up until now. While we didn't lose money, and God knows that each and every one of you have been very instrumental in keeping the company in the black, the financials for the last 3 quarters project that we are only going to break even with the same revenue as the year before if we continue on this trajectory. My boss wants to see immediate results, and he feels that the best way to achieve this goal is to reduce the amount of salary payouts. Unfortunately, that means we're going to have to replace some of our best execs with younger, less experienced execs that we can pay entry-level pay." I was taken aback. I sat there with my mouth wide open. He continued talking. If you turn your attention to the big brown envelope, you will find the terms of your severance, and I must add, it is very handsome. The same boxes before you contain your personables, like your family photos, etc. Anyone who accepted a company card can just leave the key in the spot before you. Lastly, thank you so much for all of your hard work and dedication. I wish there could have been some other way. He walked out of the room and left us there, stunned and looking at one another. That's how my life turned on a dime. I immediately began putting in applications with other advertising agencies, but soon discovered that my age, experience, and expertise were actually working against me. After 3 months and countless rejections, I had a decision to make. We had a lot of expenses now and no income coming in. I widened my job search to include places as far as 300 miles away. Finally, I got a hit. This company was young and it knew all about the one I was leaving. In fact, I had already met the CEO once when the company was in its beginning stages and needed to be represented by a stronger firm as it tried to get its foothold. Now, it was standing strong on its own. I was offered a position as a mid level exec, not on the same scale as with my previous firm, but it was solid and it would be a solid paycheck. Eileen and I discussed it and decided it was advantageous for us to sell her dream house and prepare to move. We put the house on the market and took the girls out of private day school. The boys were now in college, a necessary added expense. We downscaled on the cars, turned in all the leases, and opted for less flashy but pretty modern cars for the purpose of getting from point A to point B. We communicated constantly with real estate agents, both for selling our house and finding a new one. The transition turned out to be easier than I thought. I started my new job after 6 months of having no income but still monthly expenses. After savings were nearly depleted, our new house was a 135-mile round trip from my office. I had enough cash on hand to get to work for the next 2 weeks, at which point I would receive my first paycheck. I would have to either skip lunch or take one from home. I opted for the latter. Mind you, 30 years had passed by and gas prices were much higher than before. I miscalculated how much I was going to need. I didn't realize though until my car needle read empty and my pockets were completely bare. On this particular day, everything seemed a bit crazy that morning. I had spent nearly half the night preparing myself for an executive meeting of which I wasn't too sure about, so I was a bit preoccupied, even though I felt the meeting would go well. Both sets of twins were bickering among themselves, and I kept absent mindedly misplacing things like the morning paper, my glasses, my keys. When I finally left for work, I forgot my packed lunch. When I got to work, I looked for my lunch container, then remembered that it was still on the kitchen counter. I shrugged my shoulders. Oh well, I thought. I went on and entered the building. I had been in my office for 2 seconds when my assistant buzzed me that everyone was waiting in the conference room.
All associates, please join us in the conference room.
When I got there, it turned out to be something completely different than I thought. The CEO introduced me warmly to the rest of the staff. He proclaimed my success with this company while working at my previous place of work. He announced to everyone that I would be the lead consultant for all projects going forth. Each would need my approval before moving forward, and any advice given had to be followed. That was very touching for me. Before adjourning the meeting, he asked if there was any particular nickname that I preferred to be called. I thought about it. I had enjoyed the previous nickname, Young X, but somehow Old X did not have the same kind of appeal. I smiled. Just call me X. Before the day's end, everyone was calling me X. I wondered if anyone would remember Rick. The meeting lasted up to lunchtime. I returned to my office, walked to the window, and stared out over the parking lot. My stomach was growling at me. Even though I was alone, it embarrassed me. I giggled. A slight tap on the door, and the sound of the door opening caused me to turn around. A young woman dressed in white, wearing a white chef's hat, rolled a cart into the room. Excuse me, Mr. X. The company is treating all the new executives to the lunch of their choice. If you can make a plate or a few plates with whatever you want, I can continue to make my rounds to the other execs. My eyes opened wide. I couldn't believe it. No one knew that I was starving except him. I was so grateful. It was all I could do to keep from letting any tears leak. The rest of the day was kind of routine. I made a few phone calls, scheduled some appointments, and answered various questions from my colleagues who now had to get my approval. Pretty soon, it was time to head home. I went out to the parking lot and got into the car. I tried to turn the engine over. It acted like it didn't want to crank. I was immediately embarrassed, thinking that everyone outside was looking at me. I looked around. There was only one person in sight, and he was a ways off behind me. I turned the ignition again. Again, the refusal to crank. I fished my wallet out of my pocket and gasped. I didn't have any money. My heart sank to the pit of my stomach. Eileen and I had since taken our credit card out of our wallets and agreed not to use them until our financial situation was on better footing. I was literally stuck in the parking lot. Keeping an eye on my surroundings, I noticed the man behind me was getting closer. He seemed to be headed straight for me. When he reached the car, he motioned for me to roll down the window. "Hello there, X. What's going on? You got car trouble?" I didn't want to admit I knew the problem. I just said it won't start. He opened my driver's door and motioned for me to get out of the car. "Do you mind? I'm somewhat of a mechanic around here. I take care of all the transportation matters." I quickly exited the car and he got behind the wheel. "People around these parts call me Rick. My given name is Richard. Richard III, like the King of England back in the 1400s. I smiled. He threw his hand up and said, "Ha, here's your problem. You're out of gas. Glad it's an easy fix." He got out of the car and looked back to where he had been earlier. "Give me a sec." He kind of trotted back and disappeared for a second. 20 seconds later, he reappeared carrying what looked like a gas can. He walked back to my car and opened up the gas cap. He poured some gas out of the container and said, "Try it now." I turned the key and the car started. Before I could say anything, he pointed to where he had been and said, "Drive the car down that way and you'll see me." I did as he said. When I got to where he was, he motioned for me to drive closer, and I did. Before I knew it, he had taken the gas nozzle off of a single pump and placed it into the opening of my gas tank. He asked me to keep the car key turned forward. I did. I watched as the gas needle began moving away from the empty until it reached full and couldn't go any further. I was overwhelmed with gratitude. I thanked him profusely. He winked at me and said, "Just add yourself to the transportation matters under my care. When you run low or have a mechanical problem, just get the message to me and I'll take care of you." I turned to say something else, though I don't know what else I could say but thank you. But he was nowhere in sight. I put the car in drive and headed towards the street to go home. When I got home, I shared my lunch with Eileen and the children. Timothy and Thomas gobbled up as much as Eileen would allow them to have. The girls, Amelia and Amanda, wanted to know where all this food had come from. I told them, today, lunch and gas was on him.